Hello again, everyone. Today I am here with an update on my transcription project for Watership Down and Watership Down related books. I will put a link down below to the prior videos in this series, but I did end up completely transcribing this book, The Private Life of the Rabbit, which was the scientific, I say scientific because after reading this, although it is scientific, there's a bunch in here that is a little strange, but it is from the 70s, so I had to keep that in mind. But this book was used as inspiration for Watership Down by that author. So because of that, I decided to go ahead and include this in my collection of things that I was transcribing as part of this project. And I was using all fountain pens and inks. And so I'll just do a quick flip through this book so you can see kind of how it was laid out. So it was a scientific study of rabbits where this is all in the United Kingdom, where they put together some rabbit enclosures and then put rabbits in them. Apparently this was around the time that there was a really serious disease that was affecting rabbits called Myxomatosis. I don't know if that's still a thing or not, but Myxomatosis is also known as the white blindness, which is how it was referred to in Watership Down. The rabbits were referring to it as the white blindness. It sounds like a terrible, terrible disease. So a large part of this book focused on that. But it also talked about habits of the rabbit and just a variety of observations about rabbits. The reason why I kind of say scientific with quotes, with air quotes, is because the boundaries of the experiment, or the study that they did here, was kind of interesting to me. I mean, they didn't observe rabbits at night, which was a little strange because rabbits are nocturnal, or what do you call that when it's dawn and dusk? Diurnal, where they mostly come out at those times of day. So that seemed a little strange. And also there was a lot of projection of human behavior onto the rabbits, which was very interesting. And a lot of that came out in like the family structure of the rabbit, which clearly was still being based on some relatively sexist views of the time in the 70s. I am a child of the 70s, so it's kind of interesting to see that perspective. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on. This was a vintage book, obviously, when I got it. It's no longer in print. I really just kind of wanted to have the original copy as part of my collection of Watership Down related books. And now I have included it in my transcription project. So the rest of this video will be focusing on that. So this is where I have all these books. I have them in 2 of these E-class notebooks, A5 size, from Chic Sparrow. And I've already done, oh, and I actually added a little bookmark that is this little feather bookmark. I don't think I had a place for that, so I just kind of put it in here. So I've already done a flip through of this, which is not Watership Down. It is the sequel, which is Tales from Watership Down. And so this was transcribed into this book. I still haven't done anything with the back of the book. This is on the new Tomoe River paper that I was not that big of a fan of. This is all The Private Life of the Rabbit, and I did actually finish this before I went back to filming videos on YouTube again, and I haven't done anything since, and I'm kind of missing this process because it's very nice to just write and not really think about what you're writing. And I also kind of developed a little bit of a formatting style at the beginning. All of my titles are with this large music nib from Franklin Christoph. And I did go through a variety of fountain pens, but all of the titles of the chapters and everything is with the same pen and ink. So let's go ahead and get through here. I'm going to flip through. I'm probably not going to do each and every page. I'll probably do a little bit of skipping around. But the reason why I do these is really so that I can talk about the process, the flip throughs, I mean, so that I can talk about the process and so that I can kind of highlight some pens that were really nice to write with and just my thought process on this process itself. So one thing is, so this is a Galen Tomoe River notebook, which is with the old Tomoe River paper. So I wanted to go back to something that was a little more enjoyable to write with, and it was definitely more enjoyable. However, I did realize that I wasn't entirely crazy about blank pages for this kind of project. These were blank, and this this old one was dot grid. So I didn't use any kind of guide underneath for this one because it's dot grid. But this one, I did use do I still have that in here? I think I do, or at least I thought I did. Yeah. So here, this is what I used. And there's actually surprisingly little ink on this because I used it on each and every page. It made it a little bit difficult to put a blotter in between the page because I immediately was going to write on the back side. I could have solved that by just writing on one side of the paper, but I wanted to fit it all in this book, and I didn't think, and as you can see, I was pretty close to the end of the book. There's actually a few more pages here left, but it pretty much took up the entire book of blank pages with this particular ruling, which is 7mm. I used the smaller side, which was still kind of wide for my writing, so I just kept it like this. I think it's still pretty readable. I focused on a lot of cursive italics, and I didn't do as long a writing samples because I wanted to try a lot of different pens with a lot of different nibs. And so I only did a few pages, although sometimes I went a little longer if I was really enjoying the nib. This was a particularly nice nib. This is a broad Franklin Christoph nib, super smooth and lovely. But I was also using this to experiment with a bunch of different nibs. Like I found out that this extra fine Sig nib which is also a Franklin Christoph nib. There's a lot of Franklin Christoph nibs in here. In a Model 03 was really a great combo for writing, so I went a little longer with that as well. And some of the inks I discovered, which ones I don't particularly like. This one, Franklin Christoph Honeycomb, is a little light for me, at least in that particular nib that I had it in. It wasn't really good for long writing because it kept getting lighter and lighter as I went on. I tried to sort of have a little bit of an italicized text for things that were italicized in the book, but I don't think that worked out very well. Some of the illustrations that were in the book, I tried as best I could to copy them by tracing, basically, through Tomoe River paper. This Tomoe River paper that I used for this was a pad of Tomoe River paper, still in the old Tomoe River paper. And so I just used what did I use? A Sharpie pen. Yeah, I used this Sharpie pen. This basically just a felt tip pen for doing these illustrations. I didn't want to use fountain pen because I wanted to use something a little bit more permanent, and I also wanted something that wouldn't smear as much while I was drawing, because this paper is rather smeary if you need to be going around the page with your hand. But I think it worked pretty well that way. And then I just taped these in, or glued these in with a little tape runner. I guess taped them in with a tape runner on these particular pages. Some of them I couldn't see very well through to the drawing, so I took some liberties with some of it. And this I just did right onto the page because it was just a small illustration. This was basically the little ear tags that they were putting on the rabbits. And it really kind of showed me too how little value was put on rabbits, and probably is still the case. Rabbits were kind of viewed as a pest, and that's actually how this myxomatosis came about. I think it may have occurred naturally in the beginning, and then when farmers realized that they could use it to essentially get rid of rabbits, they perpetuated it, and it was not the best. Oh, and yeah, this is an example of a Pilot fine nib on a Custom 92, which is a piston fill pen. And I really, really loved that with this combination of sailor. It's always, I love saying that ink name because it's kind of ridiculous. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick here. But it was kind of interesting that they showed how they created little underground dens for the rabbits so that they could kind of have little windows that they could see into what they were doing. I still think this is rabbit in a hostile attitude, which I thought was kind of funny. He even had like a little furrowed brow. And these were illustrations in the book. The actual photos I did actually copy and put in here, which you'll see once we get to the middle there. This was another lovely ink. So this is, oh, and that's why I went on for a while, because and here, because this is a piston fill pen, it's the Pilot Custom 823, which is a lovely, lovely pen with a medium nib. I put Mont Blanc Petrol Blue in here, which is a beautiful ink in this pen, but I think I'm still trying to find the absolute perfect ink for that pen. Once this one runs out of that ink, I'll probably try a different one. But I was really sort of exploring finer nibs than I normally use, and broader nibs than I normally use. This is a Pilot Elite with a fine nib. I was really, really starting to love these Pilot nibs. This is Diamine Phillip ink, which has a nice sheen to it, but I don't think you can see it that well in this finer nib. So I think it was a little wasted in that pen, but it was lovely to write with. And I was also trying some lighter inks to see how they would show up with different nibs. And I did actually find some good combinations for lighter inks through this process, which was kind of nice. Let's see, this is a beautiful ink here. This is Lamy Turquoise in a Ranga Model 5. I was using my Model 5 there to see how I could write. I did find that I could not write with that Ranga Model 5, which is really, really big. If you look up that pen, it's gigantic. I didn't feel comfortable writing with it for a really super long writing session. So that was kind of interesting. And this process has all been really nice to learn about what I like and don't like. And I'm kind of missing this process. So I'm trying to find another book that I could use to transcribe. But I mean, there's really no book I love as much as Watership Down, where I would go this far down the rabbit hole with 2 additional books and transcribe that way. So I'm trying to think of something that maybe I like quite a bit, but maybe, you know, actually one of the books that I do really love is The World According to Garp. So now that I'm thinking about it, that might be a good one to do for my next transcription project. I've read that book many, many times, but we'll see. I'll kind of assess and look through my collection of books and see. Oh, and so here are the illustrations, or not the illustrations, the actual photographs that were in the book. So I put them all here. I can't remember. I think I just photocopied them the same size that they were in the other book, and they would still fit in here. So I put those where they appeared in the book here, although it's not really in the middle. It's more towards, you know, somewhere towards the first third. But yeah, during this whole process, I did do quite a bit of nib swapping, which was kind of fun, and I sort of, you know, went down that rabbit hole pretty hard. Like here's a good example of a lighter ink that I just didn't think was showing up very well. This is a fine nib, so maybe that's the explanation for it there. With the fine gold nib, which I thought would be a little softer and might work, but I since changed the ink in that pen. And I actually put that nib in a different pen as well. But super lovely. And then here, so this was actually an interesting experiment. So this is, you can see by how little I wrote with it that it wasn't really working very well. This is Tono and Limbs number 4 ink, and I was having a hard time with it not flowing well at all. So I used White Lightning, and I really did use a very small amount. I put it in a little trial vial and filled that up about halfway, and then add like just a tiny bit at the tip of a toothpick in that. And you need very, very little of this White Lightning. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, it clearly helped with the flow, but it also helped to flow through the page. So that was more prevalent in the beginning when I was getting the pen to flow, but then the ink was more light, and you know, it didn't really work all that great. I still have yet to try this with a different ink that I had some flow issues with, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, this is one of my favorite inks, Ackerman Indigo, in this Bennu Euphoria Spring Bloom with a medium nib. That's really one of my favorite combos that came out of this. And I've had a suggestion to do a series on perfect pairings of inks and pens. And I think I am going to be doing that, but I think I'm going to take it one further and say perfect pen nib ink combinations, because I am swapping out so many different inks. I think that that might be interesting for people. There's so many variations though. You could have almost infinite possibilities with a pen, a nib, and an ink of different possible combinations of those. This was another great combination, this Diplomat Arrow Flame with a fine nib with Diamine Blood Orange. I love that blood orange ink, but it is super wet, so it's a little better to put in drier, finer nibs. This was clearly a purple ink that I was enjoying. This is Monteverde Purple Rain. I really kind of went for the purple inks here. This is in my Leonardo Memento Zero in the lilac color with a medium nib. And that is now going to be the dedicated ink for that pen, because it just was a perfect combo in my opinion. And as you can see, each of the chapter headers are in that same really wide music nib, and it really made for great titles, and I think it made the writing look pretty nice. And so here's an interesting thing. So this is so I actually had switched out my nib that I had in the Leonardo Memento Zero with a Bach 14 karat music nib with the Monteverde Purple Rain. It worked okay, but I just felt like it was too gushy with that nib. So that nib has actually since moved to a different pen, but I still really did like the pen and the ink combination. So the original nib went back on there. And this is another favorite ink, Linen Toolbar Indigo. This is an M66. I didn't particularly like this ink with this pen and nib, so I ended up switching that around. Again, this was all really trying to find good combinations and combinations that I liked. This one I clearly wrote for a while with, and these are probably combinations that you've heard me talk about before. A lot of these are. This is my Franklin Christoph Model 02 with Diamine Steel Blue, which is a really great combination. And here we are with another purple ink, I think. Let's see. Yeah, so this is Twisby Royal Purple, which is actually another really great purple ink. And I clearly liked this one. What's this? Diamine Bloody Brexit in the Franklin Christoph 02, a different 02. And this one was actually quite lovely. I really, really liked how the writing looked. But it was not the smoothest writing experience. So I tend to like my pens really super smooth. This wasn't the smoothest writing experience. This was my Pelikan highlighter, and I took out the double broad nib because I was having some flow issues with it, and I ordered a broad nib that that can go into that Pelikan highlighter pen, and I ordered it with a curved Architect from FP Nibs, and it has Color Traveler Time for Whiskey in it. It's a really great combination, and I do plan to show that combination on the channel at some point. But again, you know, I loved the way it looked, but the writing experience itself on this paper wasn't my favorite. So it's all kind of interesting. It's like, do I want the experience or do I want the way it looks? But yeah, so many good combos in here. I could go on all day. This is a broad nib and a Pilot Custom 74 in forest green, and this is Franklin Christoph Shop Did in blues. That made for a really great combination too. More purple ink, Waterman Tender Purple. In writing with Tender Purple, I started adding it to all kinds of pens. I have it in several pens now. One of the things that I discovered is that this Ackermann Vorhut Violet is pretty dry, and it dries out in the pen pretty easily. So I'm really trying to find the right pen for that ink. Maybe I never will. We shall see. And this Kobe Hydrangea, I'm still really loving. And since then, I did find, you know, sort of the perfect inks. Even in this extra fine nib, though, it did work pretty well and showed up well, but it was getting really light, and then extra fine nib was just feeling kind of scratchy, so I only did a small portion. I have actually since swapped out that nib because that nib was not that big of a fan. Oh, and this is an interesting one. So this Twisby Vac Mini with a medium nib. This was the stock nib that came with it, and this is Birmingham, Ohio River. So I kept having issues with the ink flow with this. Even though I unscrewed the back, the ink was flowing. It wasn't really a problem. And then I looked at the nib pretty closely, and I realized that the slit was off center in this nib, and I think that this is something that can happen when you have that off-center nib. I've since replaced the nib with a different one, and now I have absolutely no issues at all. So sometimes there's some weird nib issues. I'm actually surprised at the volume of nib issues that there can be. And the slit being out of alignment is actually a very common one that I've seen in my pens in particular. This was clearly a combination that I liked. This is Mont Blanc Cobalt Violet in a Pocket 66 with a bold sig nib. This was actually a really nice one. This is another one that I plan to show on the channel fairly soon. Yeah, they talked all about birth control. For rabbits, there was a very frequent discussion about, and not just in this section, of rabbits losing their young in utero, and that being a form of birth control. And it tended to happen when, you know, conditions weren't good for baby rabbits and that sort of thing. So that was all kind of interesting. Let's see. And then this is a whole chapter on this disease, Myxomatosis, which, like I said, it makes the rabbits go blind, and then they get like all kinds of weird sores on their body. Poor things. It really sounds horrible. And I haven't looked it up, but I was planning on looking up whether or not this is still a thing that affects rabbits, because it does have to be a particular climate. Wetter climates and more temperate climates, apparently the virus can survive longer. Let's see. Oh, so this was one this is one I have not shown on the channel yet either. And even though this is super fine, I actually have been really, really liking this combo. It's a Sailor Pro Gear that I got very on sale at not Peyton Street Pens, at Endless Pens. And it came with a fine nib because I think that was the only nib they had available. It was either the only nib they had available, or I wanted to try the fine nib. I can't remember which. Either way, I love this fine nib, actually, with this Diamine blood orange ink. It's really flowy and nice in here. And I actually really, really liked it. It's so interesting because I've been going for extremes, like extra fine, super fine nibs, and really broad nibs. But then I still like the mediums. So, you know, there's a place for all of them. There's a place for all of them. And yeah, I'm trying to find some that I really liked. So this is interesting. So this is a Sailor music nib on an Opus 88 demo, and that's because I got the housing from Flexible Nib Factory to allow you to put the nib into housing that will fit a Yovo housing. So so I put the Sailor music nib in here because I could have a big ink reservoir. I really, really like writing with it, but it is kind of big. The writing is kind of big for everyday writing, but it's a joy to write with. So let's see. Eroded Bronze. That's a lovely, lovely Birmingham ink that I've really been loving. This Waterman Audacious Red. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I haven't gone through the ink in this particular pen still, and yeah, I'm just not sure if I'm sold on it yet. Oh, and so this is Writer's Blood. So this is when I put the Writer's Blood in my Parker 51, the new one, and realized that this is a much better fit than the Ackerman Verhout Violet, or Verhout Violet, that I had in there before. So that's a lovely combo. This is a lovely combo. This is Sailor 123 in a Franklin Christoph with a broad cursive italic, really super nice. Let's see, some Kawakos being tested out here. This, I love the way this looks. It actually was not unpleasant to write, but I really kind of like how stylized this particular nib looked. This is a medium cursive italic number 6 nib from Franklin Christoph, and this is on a hand-turned pen, and this is with Diamine Jack Frost. That was a really nice combination, especially for how it looks. I really like how that looks when it's written. So again, you know, these are all things that I'm learning through this process, and it's really kind of cool to figure it out. Here is finally Diamine Happy Holidays, which I had not used much. The the sheen is really lovely on that. So I'm trying to get through here to the end. So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. So this is the end, I think, right here. So we're getting close. And then, you know, here's the little bibliography. I tried to keep that all in the same ink. There were a lot of reference pieces of this book, which was kind of fun. So I basically took all of those little reference pieces and put them in here. This is Sailor Manyo Neko Unagi with a Platinum 3776 music nib. It's beautiful, but it's still kind of light. Both this one and the Haha by Sailor. It's really hard to find a good match for those. They're just so incredibly light. So that's it. That's my flip through there. I thought I had some more little charts and graphs. There was one, I can't remember where it ended up, that I really had to take some liberties with when drawing it up. Maybe it's back. Yes, here it is. So there were so many fine little lines in this illustration that I really just kind of had to draw it from, I mean, I had the outline, but then all these little individual lines, I really just drew that myself. So it turned out a little shabby, but I thought it was kind of interesting. And, you know, through this whole thing, I learned a lot about the anatomy of the rabbit, which was kind of fun. So that's that. That is going to be the last book in the Watership Down transcription series. So I'm not going to be doing another one of those. This traveler's notebook. Only fits 2 of these A5 size notebooks, but it fits them very well. And so this is going to go on the shelf with my other one, which actually my husband still has and has been working on some illustrations for the actual Watership down portion, which hopefully at some point he'll be done with some of those so I can show them off on the channel. But like I said, I'm looking for a new transcription project. I sort of in the background of all of this, I've been working on a memoir because I've had a very strange life, and so I've been writing this memoir in between, but it's very triggering for me. Like, I had a very hard childhood, just very difficult things to deal with in my childhood, and writing about them is kind of cathartic, but it's also triggering. So I can't write that in long sessions, which I am also trying to write handwritten and then do the second draft typed. But so that's not something that can occupy my time like this can, and can really help me learn more about, you know, the different fountain pens and nibs and that sort of thing. So I was really enjoying just the process of writing with this. So like I said, I'm going to be looking for a new book. Maybe The World According to Garp. I just thought about that on the fly while I was doing this flip through, because that is one of my favorite books. So we'll see. To be continued. When I start a new project, I will probably keep you posted on that. As part of this video, like I said at the beginning, I will put a link to the prior transcription videos that I did as part of this whole project. This Watership down project is now complete, so that closes the book, so to speak, on that one. Any new project that I do will be a different book and a different thing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. Feel free to subscribe to keep track of future videos on my channel. I hope to see you next time, but in the meantime, have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.